When Memphis police officers Elton Hyman and Leslie Wright started their shift on October 3, 1974, they were likely hoping for a quiet night. Little did they realize they would be involved in an incident that night that would be the basis for one of the most well-known cases on the use of force to be considered by the United States Supreme Court. On the night of October 3, 1974, a neighbor woman heard noises, including breaking glass, coming from a house next door to where she lived. She called the police to report what she had heard, and officers Hyman and Wright were dispatched to answer the prowler inside call. When they arrived at the scene, the neighbor woman gestured toward the adjacent house and told the officers that she heard glass breaking and that she believed someone was breaking into the house. When the officers approached the house, they saw a broken window. And Officer Hyman later testified that he realized that something was wrong inside. Officer Wright stayed in front of the house to radio dispatch, while Officer Hyman went behind the house. As Officer Hyman approached the backyard, he heard a door slam, and he saw someone run across the backyard. A fleeing suspect was Edward Garner, who had just come out the back door of the house. Garner stopped at the 6-foot-high chain-link fence at the edge of the yard. Using his flashlight, Officer Hyman saw Garner's face and hands, and while he couldn't be sure he was unarmed, he saw no sign of a weapon on Garner. Officer Hyman thought Garner was about 17 or 18 years old and about 5 foot 5 inches to 5 foot 7 inches tall. As it turned out, Garner was a 15-year-old 8th grader who was 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighed approximately 110 pounds. While Garner was crouched at the base of that chain-link fence, Officer Hyman called out, "Police, halt!" And then he took a few steps towards Garner. At this point, Garner stood up, reached up, and began climbing the fence. Officer Hyman knew if Garner got over the fence, he would not be able to catch Garner, and Garner would likely elude capture. Upon weighing his options, Officer Hyman fired his weapon and shot Garner in the back of the head as he was climbing that fence. Garner was taken to the hospital where he died on the operating room table. $10 and a purse were found on Garner's body at the time of the shooting. At the time he shot Garner, Officer Hyman was aware of a Tennessee state statute permitting an officer to use all necessary means, including deadly force, to effect an arrest when a suspect flees or forcibly resists arrest. Garner's father filed suit under 42 U.S.C. 1983 in federal district court seeking damages for violations of his son's constitutional rights. Officer Hyman asserted he was simply following Tennessee state law when he employed his use of force against Garner, and therefore, he argued, his actions were constitutional and did not violate Garner's Fourth Amendment rights. The district court held that the Tennessee state statute and Officer Hyman's actions were constitutional. However, the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit reversed, holding that the statute, and thus Officer Hyman's use of deadly force, violated the Fourth Amendment. The case eventually made its way to the United States Supreme Court, and the issue before the court was to determine the constitutionality of using deadly force to prevent the escape of an apparently unarmed and non-dangerous suspected felon. A police officer may arrest a person if the officer has probable cause to believe that person has committed a crime. But while an officer may seize the suspect to effect an arrest, the method of seizure must be reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. Ultimately, the Supreme Court held that the use of deadly force to prevent escape of all felony suspects, whatever the circumstances, is constitutionally unreasonable. Justice White, the author of the opinion, added, "It is not better that all felony suspects die than that they escape. And where the suspect poses no immediate threat to the officer and no threat to others, the harm resulting from failing to apprehend him does not justify the use of deadly force to do so." A police officer may not seize an unarmed, non-dangerous suspect by shooting him dead. As a result, the Supreme Court held that the Tennessee statute, insofar as it authorizes the use of deadly force against unarmed, non-dangerous fleeing suspects, was unconstitutional. However, the Supreme Court held that where the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a threat of death or serious physical harm either to the officer or to others, it is not unconstitutionally unreasonable to use deadly force to prevent escape. Now, what about Officer Hyman? If the statute he relied upon for his use of deadly force was unconstitutional, then weren't his actions unconstitutional as well? The district court granted Officer Hyman's motion to dismiss for qualified immunity, and the Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit affirmed the district court's findings with regard to Officer Hyman. While Officer Hyman's actions in shooting the unarmed Garner in the back of the head were unconstitutional, they were made in good faith, relying upon the Tennessee statute. As a result, Officer Hyman did not violate clearly established law when he used deadly force on Garner, and Officer Hyman was granted qualified immunity. When Officer Hyman started his shift that October day in 1974, he started the wheels of justice in motion, which eventually led to the Supreme Court delineating when the use of deadly force violates the Fourth Amendment. My name is Tom Leake, and this has been FLETC Talk.